Most of this information, or the bulk of this information that you're about to see, is from a photographic image by NASA. And this particular image was posted on the internet on the 31st of March. It was in fact taken on the 10th of March by NASA with Landsat 8, as far as I know, which is the main photographic satellite. At first glance is very difficult to see, obviously, so what we've done is we've zoomed into those two little targets for you, and then around the image and such is a wide variety of debris. Now this debris is notable, and I must stress that no one has seen all this photography before. So the oil rig that was mentioned by the New Zealand reporter was actually a New Zealand oil worker, and he was on this oil rig and he saw the flight MH370 explode in the air. Now he didn't know whether the aircraft was coming towards him or it was going away, but what he could say is that his description of it, where he was on the rig, what time it was, and what he saw, obviously. His statement has not been discredited by anyone, so it's a factual statement. This is the Cuu Long. It's a Vietnamese flag, and basically what it is an oil storage facility. It takes oil from the oil rig and stores it on board the ship, and then it takes it away to a tanker or the like. What drew my attention to it particularly is on the top left there you can see an object, or what looks like an object. Now I must stress, some people have said this is a flame from the oil rig itself, but what we've discovered, if you look at a more closer image, is that around the flame, if you like, is water disturbance, which is impossible because this would be over 100 feet from the deck. So how would you have water displacement around it? So we're not certain whether that actually is debris or not. However, in the other two images, there is debris floating by the ship at the same time. What the satellite image does is show you that there's a lot of debris in the sea. Now all these photographs come from that first singular photograph, and they show a whole variety of different types of debris, some of it of which is notable in that you could ascertain what it is. Some of the objects, though at first just look like little bits and pieces, and they are, because what happened to the aircraft, of course, is that it broke up. This is a picture of the starboard wing. Now, I don't know if you can, well, you can see this. If you want to, this is the leading edge, like the forward section. This is not the end of the wing, as you'll find out in a minute, and this is a part of the aileron and the braking system. This section here would have been joined to the main fuselage of the aircraft. What was not reported by Horizon only this week was this incredible damage, which is amazing. They should admit it. It actually lost its wingtip on the right side of the aircraft, the image you've just seen. It was taxiing along the runway in Vietnam, and an outgoing Chinese flight, and it managed to wrap its wing around that flight. Now it seems strange they should admit this, but on the previous image, and I'll just flip back it, this is this section up here, and you'll see in a later image that this is actually removed from the aircraft, either sometime at the time when the aircraft crashed or when the aircraft began to break up. So like I said, it was omitted evidence. Now we're going back to different types of debris. You will note that there is very sharp lines on this debris, so it's not just some fuzzy little bits and pieces. These are actual sections of an aircraft which are scattered all over the sea. So there's quite a bit of this. Again, like I said, there's so much of it. I didn't know whether to omit it or to bring it and put it on. But I thought the best thing to do is to just show you how much there is and how how much difference there is in material. Oh yeah, I see it. Right, here, that section there, and these lines, we believe, are part of the undercarriage of the actual aircraft. But you'll see from other images that we'll show later on what sections there are. This section here, we believe, is part of the tail section. The main upper structure, if you like, for the tail, if you like, is actually missing from the aircraft image that you'll see later on. But this is a part of the rear aileron of the rear part of that structure. Again, I'm going to zoom out so you get a rough idea the positioning of some of the pieces that you can see. This is the port side wing, which is here, and like when the master gave his reading that the wing came off, these two positionings of these wings are considerably apart. The left wing is much further down in the imaging, and the right wing is much further up the top, near to where the oil rig is. So it was evident that when that wing came off, it came off first. But the right wing, as far as we know, was still attached to the aircraft, even when it hit the sea. But I'll prove that with a photograph later. This is a close-up of the port side wing. You can still make out the leading edge. This is the front edge, and that's the back edge. These areas here is somewhere in between would have been the jet engine. So it is quite an interesting image in itself. Again, more debris. Some of it's discernible as debris. Some of these pieces, they're joined together now. The aircraft in question had miles upon miles of cabling, and a lot of these, when the aircraft broke up, would have hauled the section of pieces together. Though when the aircraft actually hit the sea, the bulk of the aircraft was still intact, and it was only later with the wave action and the currents did it begin to break up. This is showing some of the window debris. Unfortunately, some of the imaging hasn't come out, but if you, let me see it briefly. There are circle areas. Unfortunately, it doesn't look as bright here as it does on my computer, but I can't be helped. This is a part of the superstructure of the cabin as it goes round, and this section here is a part of the skin, if you like, on the outer part of the aircraft. You can just make out here, under the water, you can see there's a leading line. It changes colour along this side, and we believe these are seats in rows inside the cabin structure, because they're still attached to that main section, but they are in fact underwater. So it's what we'd expect if the cabin section broke up. Again, we see these wonderful little curving pieces of debris, and there's another section over there. Well, that's the slide from previous. And like I said, this is part of the infrastructure of the aircraft. There's a number of these sections along the hull. Right. You will start now seeing sections where letters possibly are emerging. There's a Y. You can see in the hull, and other strange objects. And here we've got possible the windows. And while we say that, it's actually an angled window is that one, as opposed to that. Now on the side of the cockpit, where the pilot would be, you have one slightly angled window, and then another small window, and then you have the main screen. The fact that we've got two windows and part of on a circular section, and again up here, get it right, another curving section, it suggests that this is actually the cockpit area. Again, we've got more sections again breaking up, and some are quite unusual in shape, but again we've got this lovely curving line, again part of the structure. And these are all the images that are on the main NASA image. Oh yeah. Here again, this is an enlargement taken of the strange markings on the fuselage sections. Some are more discernible than others. Here's a definite Y section that we recognize from the Malaysia. Now the Malaysian aircraft in itself, it has one large section that says Malaysia, and then it has a lighter section with airline. So to have a piece of debris with a Y that matches the same style as the style that's on the actual aircraft, we have to deduce with reasonable probability, bearing in mind the debris that's coming out, that this is the actual flight. I'm going to say some of the images are, I don't know, it's showing up on the screen, but it's not showing up here. Right. Again, we've got other possible lettering coming out on the debris. It's a completely different colour to that's on the white fuselage, because the whole top section of the aircraft is white, and the Malaysia is in a dark blue, and the airlines is in dark blue, but the airlines is a much thinner text, whereas the Malaysia section is a very thick text. This is part of the tail section. This is another image of one of the side of the ailerons from the rear, and you can actually see very clearly the curved end of the edge and the leading edge here, which would have been where the airflow would pass over, and this is the elevator that would allow the aircraft to go up or down. It's showing it on here, but it's not showing it on here, so I'm sorry about that. It was a very big file. What we did is that we tried to understand why the information that was being given by the authorities at the time, so we kind of had to backtrack with the information that we had. We had an aircraft down. We now had to figure out how it got there. This is the official radar, the ground radar plots for the MH370, and the red dot shows where the last reported positioning is of the aircraft as according to the radar. This is a satellite coverage, complete satellite coverage of every satellite that was used in the search. The area that we're particularly interested in is these two sections here. The lower section is where the debris is, and that's the crash section over here. That's where she came down. All these other images were taken by a variety of different satellites, including Chinese spy satellites, American spy satellites, Malaysian, Indian, you name it, every Tom, Dick and Harry. But what's interesting is that the two that are the most important have been completely ignored. When the aircraft started getting into difficulties, a section of the underbelly we believe, worked its way free. And according to the reports, the Malaysians stated that quite possibly either a captain or a cabin crew member had to come out of the cockpit area, go underneath into the cargo space, and disconnect a beacon. What we believe has happened is that a section of the underbelly has come away and severed these cables, including the control cables and fuel cables. What's interesting about this oil slick in particular, that is off South Vietnam, is it's not all aviation fuel. Some of it is hydraulic oil. And the area in which was separated, or begin to separate from the aircraft, is including the area where the main undercarriage is. So if some part of the underbelly was starting to work free and it started cutting the cables, fuel in the section of the wing that joins the main route of the aircraft, which was full at this point and under a great deal of pressure, would have been allowed free. And that would explain why, when they tested this fuel, that there was a small amount of aviation fuel, but not enough for the whole aircraft, and that the rest of it was oil, which we believe to be the hydraulic oil from the main undercarriage and control services. What the Vietnamese did then is that they looked on the western side, going towards Thailand, to see if the aircraft had crashed there. That's why you saw the bulk of the satellite imaging was in that area. Of course, they found nothing. And why they found nothing is because when the aircraft started having problems, we believe that this section is part of the underbelly which fell off. Now, in the process of that, what we believe has happened is that the aircraft at 35,000 feet lost a section of its underbelly that was so damaged that it now acted against the flow of the aircraft, pulling the aircraft over to the left. This will put stress on the main wing, the left side wing, which began to droop. Now, whether the aircraft had decompressed, we don't know, but whatever happened, they were unable to communicate. They had no time to make any decisions. In fact, they probably didn't even know what was going on. And the aircraft was forced to turn. And like I said, they had no control over this. The wing was forced to turn. The more the wing drooped, the more the aircraft turned. And we do know from the satellite data and also from the radar data that the aircraft crossed its own path. And as more of the wing droop took it on, it took it off towards China, almost back onto its original route. So you've got here where it starts from its takeoff point. That's the area where it goes off the radar, and we believe it took a full circle round because the oil slick was found over here. If it had been found over here, the currents would have taken it down, and it didn't. And what the Vietnamese did, there's a little island off here, and they thought the aircraft had gone in that vicinity because of those oil slicks. But the Chinese military satellite picked up the debris in this location. So it meant the aircraft had to have come over to this location. But we know that it crossed its own path because there's a radar plot showing that it did. We know from the oil rig worker who saw the aircraft, though we believe this is further over here, but this just gives you a rough idea of the positioning. Now this image shows the aircraft in the sea. This was the first image that we could find of a satellite image that actually showed the aircraft in the sea immediately after it crashed. This is the right wing. You will note there's still a part of a section missing. This is where the cockpit area is, which is badly broken up. This is the section aft of the main wing, which is also beginning to break up. Here's where the tail section is, here. And there's a section missing. Like I said, the aircraft, the sheer impact of hitting the sea would have caused fracture lines all over the fuselage. And it's inevitable that the sheer weight of the aircraft that was sticking up, that it would begin to break up with the sea currents and the like. And of course, after this comes a number of shots from TOMNOD. Now, TOMNOD is the public service satellite which is used to form digital globe, which is formed to make Google Earth. So it's a credible satellite system. It's not something you can fake. But what's really interesting about these images is the people who sent me them from Canada had their homes broken into and their rubbish gone through. One of the persons who called Mikey for this point of view, the satellite system he was using is called Blackridge. It's another well-known satellite system, and he contacted the Royal Mounted Police and he made an official crash statement which was credible. It's on record, it's supported. The Mounted Police did do an investigation, but then of course it went very quiet. What's interesting about these images that they took, and some of them are screen captures and some of them they took with their mobile phones, is that the original satellite images which showed them in the China Sea had their coordinates altered to say that they were in the Indian Ocean. This is factual data, and we put some of that on our own website, but I have plenty of emails to prove it if anybody wanted copies. What's interesting, of course, is the radar coverage. These are captures from the Malaysian Airways, and you can see the aircraft does turn. Now, according to their radar system, it goes across there. Well, actually it doesn't. This anomaly here is what the military radar picked up. It did not pick up the flight going across the country. All it does show is that the aircraft was turning. And what we believe, of course, is it turned completely round, crossed its own path, because the wing was dragging it over, and dragged it over to the north there. This is the area in question. This is where the oil was found, with the aviation fuel on board. This is the aircraft in question in red. You can note all the other aircraft flying around. These are legitimate aircraft going on their normal flight routine. This is the Chinese flight recorder, or radar I should say, showing the original flight plan, which is up here. You'll note though that when it gets here, there's a number of different flight angles, and we only know of one aircraft ahead of it and one aircraft coming down, and yet we believe this is the flight track. Now, according to the Horizon program, these tracks are like fixed tracks, and so they can only estimate where the aircraft is. So we're not clear as to what that's showing, to be honest, but it's an interesting point. Now, this is the main Malaysian plot. Again, it shows the flight nice and clearly, and you can see the other aircraft in the vicinity at the same time. But now this is where it gets a bit strange. There's the aircraft, quite discernible, but down here there's an anomaly. It's marked here with a question mark. Unfortunately, I can't show you the moving image because it would take up too much memory on the computer. But what happens on the moving sequence is that dot changes into an aircraft and suddenly races away off towards the northeast. Now, when the first reporting came out about these aircraft, it was supposed that the MH370 was the aircraft, in fact, racing off at speed. And that was because they didn't have the information about what this particular object was. But as you can clearly see, it's too far away. It can't possibly be any way related. But it was related as being a part of it in the story. What we do know for a fact is that the Chinese tested this weapon. Now, they first did their first test in January of this year over mainland China, and America tracked it. Basically, it's a rocket, a ballistic rocket, which fires up into space this drone. It's an unmanned aircraft, and it's released at altitude, and as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, air is forced up along the side into the engines, which is a ramjet engine, and it comes down at an incredible speed of Mach 6. Now, when the radar blip that you just saw previously came onto the screen, it just comes onto the screen as a question mark. Then it changes into an aircraft, because it's now at radar level, and races off. It's quite possible that that is what you're seeing on that radar. This American spy plane, again, was used to search for the MH370, flying out of Australia and also flying out of Guantanamo Bay. But what's interesting about it is that the aircraft that was spotted over the Andaman Isles was said to be the MH370. But if this aircraft was lower down in the air and you'd never seen a Boeing aircraft, and then you saw that, you could easily mistake it as the said flight. What was interesting was the witnesses couldn't say what the colours were on board the aircraft. If you missed the star, you wouldn't know. But the fact is that that aircraft was in the vicinity at the time when the aircraft allegedly was seen after it had already crashed. Because we have the satellite image, we know for a fact that the aircraft is down, so anything after the event has to have a rational explanation, and that's why I'm showing you these different imaging. Now, this is only a graphic, you might add, but it gives you an idea. The witnesses saw an explosion in the sky and various parts coming down. Now, this was witnessed on land, it was witnessed at sea, and it was witnessed by independent persons in fishing boats. According to the Vietnamese, the official line is that it's a meteorite, and that part of it landed in Vietnam. And what we believe the section that landed in Vietnam is probably one of the engines, because we know that the bulk of the aircraft crashed in the sea, because we got pictures of the debris. So I'm quite satisfied to say that the aircraft is definitely in the South China Sea. It's definitely off the coast of Vietnam. And this is just another adding to the story, if you like. This is the email that the oil worker stated in respect to his description of the crashing of the aircraft. What you'll notice is the similarities as to what the master, if you like, describes in his story. So at the moment, a lot of the information that he has stated, though we don't wholly agree in the distances, and there are some slight variations, but on average what he was saying actually happened. It's just uncanny. Now, some of you may know, or may not know, that the South China Sea has been annexed by China. There's been a long dispute with China taking over some of the islands. Now you might say, what's this got to do with the aircraft? It's got everything to do with it. Down at this location here, at the time of the crash, there was an American-led naval exercise, and up to the north, along this coast here, were Chinese and Vietnamese and Russian ships. And it was a chance for America to show solidarity with its neighbours in the Asia region against the oppressors, i.e. China. What we believe possibly is a scenario is that though the aircraft has come down in Vietnamese waters, and because of the high tension between Vietnam and China, is the Vietnamese didn't tell anybody that the aircraft was down. Because they didn't want either American-led warships or Chinese warships into their territorial waters so close to their main capital city. We're virtually at war in this area, so it's quite understandable for that reason. I must stress at this point that like the New Zealander who made an official statement, and the people in Canada who made official statement. I too was advised to go to the police, and I too have made an official statement, a crash statement, that was logged at Northallerton Police Station 2 weeks ago. And I know that it was passed to police intelligence as a legitimate source. So I'm covered, they're covered. So just to let you know, that is a matter of thing. Now, though I haven't actually given the explanation for the sequence, but this gives you an idea as to what I said. One is where the radar plot disappears. Two is where we're seeing the oil from the aircraft as it should begin to have the bottom section come away. And three is where it's beginning to eject. Four, we believe, is where the wing is starting to droop. And five, again, as it begins to drag the aircraft round in a full circle. Six is where we know that the Chinese satellite first picked up the first piece of debris. That was widely published. Then it all went quiet. They decided, of course, for themselves, for whatever reason, that it had now gone off into the Indian Ocean. How? I don't know. Seven, we believe, is where the fuel oil is now injecting itself directly into the engine. 8, we believe, is where the engine either comes off or explodes. And 9 is where the wing comes off and the aircraft spirals down. It does differ in the distance to which the master says. He believes that his reading took the debris further up near Beijing Bay. But what is interesting, even out of that, this area here is very deep water. It drops off to nearly 15,000 feet. And because the debris now is fanning out in a large arc coming down, it is a possibility that some of it has gone into the deep area. What's interesting now is that the time of year, the currents have now changed. The actual, at the time of the crash, the currents would all be coming in this general direction. Because of the time of year, the currents are now moving back up towards Vietnam and China. So with all likelihood, whatever debris, if it's still afloat, will now be returning back towards the Vietnamese coast.